Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to be talking about Tucker at the World Government Summit in Dubai. This is shortly after his interview that he did with Putin. So the panel is asking him questions about why did he conduct the interview in certain ways and some of his perspectives on where the world's going and where the United States is going. So let me do this critique. This was published about 19 hours ago. So I did watch it last night. So this is my second view of this video, and I will comment throughout. I might be playing some other stuff that's, related to what's going on in the Middle East or with Biden. So let's begin. Technical problems, hold on.
I'll start in reverse order. Why now? Well, I've been trying for 3 years to do this interview. The U.S. government prevented me from doing it by spying on my text messages and leaking them to the New York Times. And that spooked the Russian government into canceling the interview. So I've been trying to do this, but my country's intel services were working against me illegally, and that enraged me because I'm an American citizen. I'm 54, I pay my taxes, I obey the law. And there was no expectation in the America that I grew up in that my government and its intel services, NSA and CIA, which are always outwardly focused on our foreign enemies, would be turned inward against American citizens. And I'm shocked by that, and I'm infuriated by that. And so once I discovered that that was happening, and I confirmed it was happening, and they admitted that they did it, then I was totally determined, monomaniacally dedicated to doing this interview, not simply because I want to know what Vladimir Putin is like and what he thinks about a war that is resetting the world and really gravely damaging my country's economy, but also because they told me I couldn't on the basis of illegitimate means and for no really clearly stated justification. And I thought, that can't stand. I want to live in a free country. I was born in one. And I'm going to do whatever small thing I can do to maintain, the society that I love.
You are known to be pro-Republican Party, right wing of the Republican Party. This is what they claim. They said first you've been a Democrat.
That's not true.
A Republican. Okay. Or you are known to be pro-Trump, anti-Biden. What is truthful in this? And you went to Putin because you are pro-Trump and anti-Biden?
My views are not very interesting. I'm not sure how to characterize them. They're changing as quickly as the world itself is changing. And as a matter of principle, I think that, that your views should change when the evidence changes, and assumptions that you had in the past are proven wrong. That has happened to me virtually every month of my life. If you pay close enough attention, you can rate your own performance, just as if you're betting on sports. I lost that one. And when you do, when it turns out that the things you thought were true were lies, you should admit it. So what are my views? I'm not certain. Tell the truth is my main view, and I plan to do that to the best of my ability. So Trump played no role in this whatsoever. There's obviously an election in my country coming to fruition in November. I have no idea what's going to happen. I think that the current administration is very obviously incompetent, and the president is senile. That's not an attack. Everyone knows it. It has now been confirmed, I would say, this week in the report that you're all familiar with. But and that's very sad. But it had sort of nothing to do with the interview. I wanted to interview Putin because He's the leader of a country that the US government is sort of at war with, though not in a declared way.
Sir, you know your President Biden well.
Yes, I do.
You've been working in several media organizations from PBS, CNBC, MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, and you've been covering this field well, and you know the American politicians. And now you've been following Putin, and you did a very lengthy interview with this gentleman. And for sure, to interview them, you did your homework and you did your research. Comparing the culture, the competence between Vladimir Putin and Biden, how do you see the two men now running the world?
I mean, if this were boxing, the fight would be called by the medic. And I say that as an American, and I don't have another passport. I don't plan to ever leave my country. My family's been there hundreds of years, and I love it. I am a patriotic American. And I grieve when I see that the president is non compos mentis, and that in my country, it is considered very rude to say that. And you sort of wonder, how did you get to a place where you have an incompetent president who's driven not simply the standard of living, but life expectancy downward, and no one feels free to say that? That's not a political observation. It's a statement of fact, which is provable empirically. And the most radicalizing thing I would just say for me in the 8 days I spent in Moscow was not simply the leader of the country, who of course is impressive. It's the largest landmass in the world. And it's wildly diverse, linguistically, culturally, religiously. It's hard to run a country like that for 24 years, whether you like it or not. So an incapable person couldn't do that. He is very capable, and many of you know him and you know that. What was radicalizing, very shocking, very disturbing for me was the city of Moscow, where I'd never been, the biggest city in Europe, 13 million people. And it is so much nicer than any city in my country. I had no idea. My father spent a lot of time there in the 80s when he worked for the US government and barely had electricity. And now it is so much cleaner and safer and prettier aesthetically. It's architecture, it's food, it's service than any country and city in the United States that you have to. And this is not ideological. How did that happen? How did that happen? And at a certain point, I don't think the average person cares as much about abstractions as.
The problem is that socialism has destroyed our cities in the United States. They're over indebted with sovereign bonds, municipality bonds. They are run by politicians that are on the take. They have to be towing the party line for what, for example, look at what's happening with immigration in the United States. In inner cities that are run by the Democrats, you have these politicians starting to get strained because of lack of resources, because they're sanctuary cities, but they're still towing a party line, which is open borders, because America is the smorgasbord of the world. We have government officials that are more about their own power and their own financial gain than the betterment of the society that they are in charge in running. They're not following their constitutional oath to their city, to their state, or even at the federal government level. Socialism destroys society, doesn't help it. Ayn Rand warned us. We didn't listen. We didn't read her books. We ban her books. We have a society that doesn't even read anymore. Atlas has shrugged. And now we have an empire in decline. Thank you, Democratic Party. Thank you, ultra-liberal, for fucking up America.
The concrete reality of his life. And if you can't use your subway, for example, as many people are afraid to in New York City because it's too dangerous, you have to sort of wonder, like, isn't that the ultimate measure of leadership?
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
true, by the way.
Exactly. You got lawless people. And that lawlessness seems to be perpetuated by a certain type of ethnicity. We don't have to go into the details. All you have to do is just turn on the news and you'll know what I'm talking about. And then they want reparations. You don't give me reparations, I'm going to steal. You give me reparations, I'll still steal. That's their mentality.
For an American to go to Moscow, I didn't know that, I've learned it this week, to Singapore, to Tokyo, to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Because these cities, no matter how we're told they're run and on what principles, that wonderful places to live that don't have rampant inflation, where you're not going to get raped.
And so, excuse me,
What is that?
excuse me, are you anti-American model?
No, I am the most pro-American. So I'm 54. I was born in 1969. I grew up in a country that had cities like Moscow and Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Singapore and Tokyo, and we no longer have them. And what I have discovered is that's a voluntary.
I completely agree with Tucker on this. There was a sweet spot in the economy for people to get high-paying jobs in the 80s and the 90s, to be able to support their family, to be able to grow a business, to be able to be prosperous, to have that quote, American dream. And right when around 2000, really you start seeing the change in around probably 98. But between 1998 to about 2000 to 2002, all right? So right before 9/11 and right after 9/11, that was slowly declining. And the ease for prosperity was reduced. There was still prosperity to be had, but it was the beginning of the decline. And then the over 20-year war in the Middle East that ate up over $5 trillion. And so what happens is you start questioning these things, and you're going to be demonized that you're anti-American because you're against the government, or you're against the trajectory of the United States. You're against the national security state. This is the way I would answer that. It questioning the issues of America, questioning the issues of your country, is not being unpatriotic. Actually, by trying to make it better is probably one of the most patriotic things that you can do. Now, there are many ways of doing it. Some of it is through teaching people. Some of it is going kinetic. Some of it is, peaceful means. Some of it is more violent means. But there are things that people can do to save their country and stop the country from devolving into lack of prosperity and loss of sovereignty. But you'll have people in the mainstream media or in certain circles that will say, you question the government, you must be anti-American. Or you question Biden, you must be a neo-Nazi. If you support Trump, you must be a neo-Nazi. That's how they're spinning it in the news. So what we really need to do is be more patriotic and question where the country is going and how to correct it. Try to do it peacefully. If not in peaceful means, then it'll have to be done in kinetic means if you really want to save the country. But most people will just fall asleep and be comfortably numb and let the chips fall where they may and lose your country. being against the government, being against the national security state is not being anti-American. It's actually being very pro-American.
Choice. As inflation is, as you heard in that fascinating last panel, inflation is the product of choices made mostly by the central bank, not exclusively, but by policymakers. Crime, same. You don't have to have crime, actually. If you don't put, my children don't smoke marijuana at the breakfast table. Why? Because I won't allow them. It's very simple. It's a short conversation. No. And you can run your country the same way. We're not going to put up with that. So don't do it. And people understand that. Filth, graffiti, Paris, one of my favorite cities, New York, one of my favorite cities, are filthy. And part of the reason they're filthy is because people spray paint obscenities on buildings and no one cleans it up. So that encourages more people to do the same. And our policymakers, for some reason, don't notice this. London, another one of my favorite cities. You see English girls begging for drugs on the sidewalk. And I thought to myself, if I'm Boris Johnson, who briefly and very badly ran that country, I would ask myself, like, wait a second, my countrymen are begging for drugs on the street. Maybe I should do something about that. But now he'll show up and give some speech about Ukraine and how we need to send, more cluster bombs to the brave Ukrainians. What are you doing?
You mentioned Ukraine.
The way I phrase it, Tucker, is you have to tell the black community in the United States, put away the spray paint and pull up your fucking pants and make your bed.
By talking to this gentleman, President Putin, for this lengthy interview, my question is, did you have coffee with him? Did you have any off-the-record discussion before the interview?
After.
Did you feel during the interview or before or after that this man can make or is willing to do a historical compromise, number one, on the status of the world with the West, and number two, about Ukraine? Is he a compromiser, yes or no?
Of course. Right? I mean, leaders of every country on the planet, other than maybe the United States during the unipolar period, are forced by the nature of their job to compromise. Compromise is part of it. That's what diplomacy is. And he's among those. His position is clearly hardening. Russia has been rebuffed by the West. I mean, Vladimir Putin, I'm not flacking for Putin. I'm an American. I'm not going to live in Russia. I don't love Vladimir Putin. I'm stating the facts. He asked Bill Clinton to join NATO. He tried to make a missile deal.
He mentioned this in the interview.
That's correct. And he's mentioned it in other forums as well. And NATO said, no, we don't want you. Now, if the point of NATO, the point of NATO originally, of course, the post-war goal of NATO was to keep the Russians, the Soviets, from coming into Western Europe. It was a bulwark against the Russians. So if the Russians actually join the alliance, that would suggest you have solved the problem and you can move on to do something constructive with your life. But we refused.
The reason why we refused is because we want to expand NATO. We don't want a reason to abolish NATO. That's the reason. Because America's always on a war footing. It doesn't want to solve the problem. It wants a perpetual problem.
Meditate on that. Go sit in the sauna for an hour and think about what that means.
Before sitting in the sauna, a question now. Final conclusion. Yes, Vladimir Putin is eager for a compromise like Yalta, Sykes-Picot, the Ottoman Empire, Sèvres agreements, any international agreement to share power and to share influence in the world with the West, if there is somebody who is willing. And Biden administration wants tension, wants war, want to exert pressure on him so that they can weaken his economy and weaken his alliance with China. This is what you are reaching from your conclusions?
My conclusions are in code. I mean, I've been thinking about this for a couple of years. I have a whole new set of data. I'm all over it. I'm not a genius, so it's going to take me a while to figure out what I think. But at this stage, 4 days later, I would say, first of all, Yalta and Sykes-Picot are two of the worst agreements ever struck. So I hope whatever comes out of this is nothing like those. But first things first, Putin wants to get out of this war. He's not going to become more open to negotiation the longer this goes on. One of the things we've learned in the course of the last 2 years is that Russia's industrial capacity is a lot more profound than we thought it was. And Russia, this country we were assured was a gas station with nuclear weapons, has a pretty easy time making missiles, rockets, and artillery shells, whereas NATO doesn't. So we should think about what that means. One. Two, the West doesn't spend any time, or our policymakers in Washington spend no time thinking about, like, what are the achievable goals here. I have heard personally US government officials say, well, we're just going to have to return Crimea to Ukraine. Well, you don't need to be a Russia scholar, so that's not going to happen short of a nuclear war. That's insane, actually. So even to say something like that reveals that you're a child, you don't understand the area at all, and you have no real sense of what's possible. And so as long as our leaders, and not simply in the US, but NATO, and I really mean Germany, don't like take the time to learn about what's possible, like we're not going to get anywhere.
You think there is a big gap between the depths of understanding the philosophy of history between Biden and between Putin? You see Putin, who have studied history and who is very deep in history, and he looks like he gave you a lecture in for 30 minutes concerning the history of Ukraine and its relationship with the mother Russia. Does Biden understand the law of action and reaction which moves a country like Russia?
I can't overstate how incapacitated Joe Biden is. That's not an attack. That is a fact. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. So these are not decisions Joe Biden is making. But there are capable people around Biden, and I know them. What they lack is any perspective at all. So a conversation with a US policymaker about the history of the region would begin and end with a conversation about, of course, Chamberlain and Churchill and Hitler, period. So the American policymaker historical template is tiny. In fact, there's only one. And it's a 2-year period in the late 1930s. And everything is based on that understanding of history and human nature. And that's insane. And so actually, American policymakers have convinced themselves that Vladimir Putin is going to take over Poland. And it is not a defense of Putin. I don't mean to defend Putin. I'm not a fan of Putin's, and I'm not a subject of Putin's. I'm an American. However, there's no evidence that Putin has any interest in expanding his borders. He's the largest country in the world, and it's very hard to run. They don't need natural resources. There's nothing in Poland he wants. There's nothing he will gain by taking Poland other than more trouble. If you're saying he could invade Poland, you know what you're talking about.
Here is a point in the interview when you asked him, are you ready to invade Poland?
Are you an expansionist power?
Expansion, yes, in Poland. He said, only if Poland launched a war, of course, on Russia. Okay? Ukraine did not launch a war on Russia, and he invaded Ukraine. Why you didn't follow up on this question?
I started with that question, actually. But he treated me to 35 minutes of Catherine the Great,
okay,
and the Rus. But no, the core question is, why did he move his forces into Eastern Ukraine? And I watched this from a distant vantage of the United States, and I watched the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, go to the Munich Security Conference just days before that, in February of 2022, and say in a public forum, a press conference to Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, we want you to join NATO, which is another way of saying, it's a synonym for, we plan to put nuclear weapons on Russia.
See, there's no debate for
Are you joking? Of course they did. And it just tells you how constipated and restricted and censored the US media landscape is, that I was the only one who said that. Well, wait a second. The purpose of diplomacy is to reach a peaceful, mutually one hopes beneficial conclusion to a crisis. So if you're showing up voluntarily at the Munich Security Conference and saying, hey, Zelensky, why don't you allow us to put nuclear weapons on Russia's border? You're cruising for a war because you know that's the red line. Because Putin has said that. And
if you watch the interview, there are 5 pressure points that Putin discusses that during his administration as the Russian leader. 5 pressure points that happened over the years that led him to make the move that he made. And each one of those pressure points were conducted by the US, either through just policy through the White House or covert operations with the CIA. He goes in detail on what those 5 pressure points were. The United States government doesn't want to admit to its citizens that it was poking the bear over a 20-year period, 23-year period. And so when Russia actually gained some territory because of failed foreign policy by the US government, then they try to demonize Russia. Meanwhile, what we should have done was said we had a strategic failure of policy and that we need to readjust and normalize relations with Russia. And things would have been better and integrate Russia into the world economy instead of trying to have the sanctions and to demonize and create more pressure points. It was failed American policy. But the mainstream media wants you to believe that it was all Russia's fault. Now, that doesn't mean that Putin is in the right in taking land. I'm just saying that hearing it from the bear's mouth, Putin, he said that there were 5 pressure points that happened and he begged for integration and the US balked. These are facts. These aren't just opinions. The United States government wants you to think that it's only Russia's fault.
Any close observer of the area nobody knows.
Now, do you have an explanation, a reasonable explanation, why there is this anti-war and this very negative remarks about this interview from a lot of your colleagues and a lot of politicians in the world?
One of the ways that I think I'm different is I don't like the internet, and I haven't seen any of the reaction, and I would imagine, you know, I'm not the most popular person among my colleagues in the United States. I wouldn't have dinner with them anyway, so it's never a loss. But, you know, I can't imagine what their motives would be. I didn't go to Russia, of course, to promote Vladimir Putin. And if that was my purpose, I'd say so, because I'm not embarrassed. I went because I felt that most Americans, in whose name all of this is being done, don't really know what's happening, and they know nothing about the guy they're supposedly at war with unofficially. And I just felt that my job, if I have a job in this world, is to bring information to people so they can decide. And so I wanted to do the longest interview I could with Vladimir Putin that contained the most amount of Vladimir Putin talking, not me grandstanding about what a great person I am. When an American journalist interviews someone like Vladimir Putin, the whole point of the interview is to say, I'm a good person and you're not. And that interview was aimed at his colleagues in the newsrooms in the United States. I'm a good person. Why are you such a bad person? You're committing genocide. Okay. That's not fruitful, and that's really not my role. I care what God thinks of me, what my wife thinks of me, what my 4 children think of me, and that's all I care about. So I don't need to prove that I'm a good person. I want to hear Vladimir Putin talk so people in my country can assess what's happening. That's it.
I'll use the devil's advocate.
But advocate away.
Yes. Okay, I'll tell you. You should challenge.
Before he does his question, I'm going to go to commercial because this is PNA. And this is a lot better than CNN. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get my toothpaste. It'll whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, neutralize pathogens, reduce gingivitis, and help with cardiovascular disease. Go to my store and get this structural nano silver toothpaste. It has no fluoride in it. Get the fluoride out of your life. Fluoride makes you stupid, literally. So please go to my store and get the toothpaste. Get a couple tubes of this, 2, 4 tubes, whatever. All right. And stock up for your family. This is the best toothpaste that you can buy. Also go to my store and get the structural nano silver gel. It will help to neutralize pathogens. It stays active for 5 hours on your skin. So you put it on your hands and it'll neutralize pathogens. You can put it around your mouth, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils, around your ears, around your eyes, and it'll stay active. You can use it as a skincare product. You can put it on your skin at night before you go to bed and then exfoliate when you wake up. And you'll notice a difference in your skin health. We're going to be, you know, the United States just went through a big snowstorm, especially in New York, and, you know, people are going to get colds and sniffles and stuff like that. Get my drops, my structural nanosilver drops and lozenges. I have blueberry for the drops in 100 count, and also in honey lemon. It's a structural nanosilver. And what will it do? It will neutralize pathogens and it helps soothe that throat. I also have larger lozenges in green apple in the 20 count. And also the larger lozenges in Manuka honey, structural nanosilver in a 21 count, and elderberry zinc in a 21 count. So please go to my store and get the structural nanosilver lozenges and drops. And finally, to help improve your cardiovascular health by maintaining a proper lipid profile, take my omega-3. All right, this will improve your cardiovascular health by bringing down LDL. And if you couple this with some proper exercise, you're going to be able to increase your HDL. What you want is to bring up your HDL, bring down your LDL, bring down your triglycerides, bring down your cholesterol, and you'll improve cardiovascular health. Go to my store, get the omega-3 to improve your lipid profile. Improve your cardiovascular health. This is PNN.
The rules of an interview, and you're a master in your business. It's not for me to give you a lecture about that, but you should challenge some ideas. For instance, you didn't talk about freedom of speech in Russia. You did not talk about Navalny, about assassinations, about the restrictions on opposition in the coming.
What about freedom of speech in the United States? You really think you have it? You don't. Do you think that there's not coordinated assassinations in the United States? It does happen. We have a runaway national security state. You really think that you have true civil liberties? You don't. You know why? Because the NSA is constantly watching you, illegally.
Elections.
I didn't talk about the things that every other American media outlet talks about.
Yes,
those are covered, and because I have spent my life talking to people who run countries in various countries and have concluded the following: that every leader kills people, including my leader. Every leader kills people. Some kill more than others. Leadership requires killing people. Sorry, that's why I would want to be a leader. That press restriction is universal in the United States. I know because I've lived it. I've asked my phone. I've had a lot of jobs. And I've done this for 34 years, and I know how it works. And there's more censorship in Russia than there is in the United States, but there's a great deal in the United States. And so, at a certain point, it's like people can decide whether they think, what countries they think are better, what systems they think are better. I just want to know what he thinks. That was the whole point.
Yes, I was very surprised about an inappropriate remark. I don't think it contains any of the what you can call jauntiness or niceties from Mrs. Clinton when she mentioned a phrase about you. I don't want to repeat.
No, you're not going to hurt my feelings, don't worry.
Well, gentlemen, she called this gentleman, this honorable gentleman, that he is playing the role of a. You say it.
I didn't see it.
You didn't.
She's a child. I don't listen to her. How's Libya doing?
No. Okay. She said the useful idiot, and if you see the interview, that has nothing to do with this at all. He was trying to get a testimony about the world as Putin sees it, and this is exactly what we need to know, how this man thinks. Either you consider him an enemy, or you consider him a friend, or you consider him a dictator, but you should understand how the man thinks. Now,
you put it better than I could. You just described my motive right there.
Okay, sir. Now the question is, if this is that is that, as they say in the United States, and this is the power of media, and the way the media is becoming very biased in a deep state like America. Where are we going in the model of democracy in the world?
Media information in a free country is a counterbalance against entrenched power, not just government power, but the economic power, business. It was in my country constitutionally. It is designed to serve as a counterbalance to that. So if sources of information, media outlets align with entrenched power, then you have a powerless population, and it's totalitarian, and that is very quickly the direction the United States is headed. And I do think that technology abets this progression, and machine learning especially. And so it's a perilous moment if it, we're a democracy purportedly, and a prerequisite for democracy is information so that the electorate can make up its mind and decide who to choose. And so if you don't have access to information, you don't have democracy. And we're in this sort of weird spiral where our leaders lecture us ever more about democracy and how sacred it is, even as they choke it to death. And so I think the people who provide information and bring facts to the public have a critical role to play. And right now it's difficult. I'm not facing any great, I don't need to cast myself as a hero. I'm certainly not a hero at all. But
most people make one terrible mistake when investing. They never sell. If all you ever do is buy and hope the market,
hero at all. But I do think it's tougher and tougher to do that. And that means we have a greater obligation to do it.
Sir, do you have an explanation till this moment, since the Gaza events took place, till now, nobody came out and said how on earth the United States of America is vetoing the stoppage of fire, how a country would veto not to continue war, how somebody is against stopping a war.
The United States is, for this moment, is the most powerful country in the history of the world. So if you were to frame this in terms we're all familiar with, which are the most basic terms, the terms of the family, the United States would be dad, it would be the father. And the father's sacred obligation is to protect his family and to restore peace within his walls. So if I come home, I have 4 children, if I come home from work and 2 of my kids are fighting, what's the first thing I do? Even before I assess why they're fighting, before I gather the facts and know what's happening, I stop fighting.
Yes.
So if I come home and I have 2 kids fighting and I say, go, beat the crap out of them, I am evil. Because I violated the most basic duty of fatherhood, which is to bring peace, because I have the power. I'm the only one who can bring peace. And so if you see a nation with awesome power abetting war for its own sake, you have a leadership that has no moral authority, that is illegitimate. And I mean that too. And I'm not even referring to any specific region or conflict. I mean generally. And
I would say in general terms, Tucker's right, especially with regions of the world where a Westphalian perspective would be the foundation for negotiations. The problem comes in is you don't have a Westphalian situation when it comes to Israel and its surrounding community, because it's thousands of years that is dealing with religion, not Westphalian constructs. And there needs to be an equilibrium that takes place. Now, one side, the Israelis, are moving towards the borders or wanting to move towards the borders of biblical type in the reboot of the temple. That means that the Dome of the Rock comes down. That means the borders of Israel expand. That means the Palestinians out of the West Bank and out of Jerusalem and into Gaza Strip. That means Israel moving into parts of Jordan and into Lebanon and into parts of Syria. That's what that means. And also parts of the Sinai Peninsula, which means into Egypt. The other side, the Palestinians, wants more land. The thing is, this is a battle between Esau and Jacob, going all the way back to biblical times. And Jacob has a claim through the covenant through the giving of the Torah, that line is the rightful owner, the inheritance from Abraham, and not Esau. And we're seeing the decline of Esau and the rising of Jacob. So the problem in Israel is a lot more complicated, Tucker, than some typical Westphalian thing like Ukraine. So Tucker is wrong when it comes to the Middle East. Let Esau and Jacob fight it out. And by the way, it was predicted in the Bible that Esau will die by the sword.
That deeply. And it's something that I try to express, and I'm often called a traitor for saying that. It's the opposite. I say that because I believe in the United States. I think it has been a morally superior country. And if we allow our leaders to use our power to spread destruction for its own sake, that is shameful. It's a binary, okay? It's a black and white. It's a 0 and a 1. You are either creating or you're destroying. You're improving or you're degrading. And that's how you know whether something is good or bad, whether it's virtuous or evil. If you just judge the fruits. By its fruits you will know it. And I'm very...
Exactly, Tucker. Don't you think that if Jacob reached homeostasis in that region, that the fruits would be far sweeter than anything that Esau would produce? Just look at how Esau is governing Gaza and parts of the West Bank.
And concerned that we are entering an era where this awesome force for good is instead being used for evil.
2 quick questions because I ran out of time. First question is, now in the American elections,
Before we go to his question, I'm going to have to do a commercial because this is PNN. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description of this video, and get the multivitamin that I offer on my store. It's easy to digest, and these are cofactors that help with enzymatic activity. You'll have proper metabolism, and your health will be improving as part of the anti-aging protocol. Please go to my store and get this multivitamin. I have several different scent soaps that are structural nanosilver, high quality soaps, and this will help to neutralize pathogens. Please get this peppermint version, the oatmeal version, and then I also have lavender and charcoal tea tree. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com and get those products. Lastly, I partnered up with Rainbow Herbals, and we've created these deodorants that have no aluminum in it. It's all natural. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. It's a very high quality deodorant that will help to detoxify your body. It's dual purpose. You use it every day. It's for males and females. I have it in citrus, and I also have it in peppermint, lavender, tea tree. So there's 2 versions. And you use this every day as a deodorant, and it'll help to detoxify your body. Please go to my store and get a couple bars of the deodorant. This is PNN. Where else are you going to get unfettered commentary about what the hell's going on?
Probabilities. Either it's Biden and Trump, or Biden and somebody else, not Trump, or no Biden and no Trump, and circumstances or fate get us 2 different people representing a Republican or Democrats. What do you think? Where are we going to reach coming 19th of November? Who will be running the show?
Honestly, I have a defense idea. But I think there's volatility ahead in our political sphere. I mean, clearly there is, because
I like you when you said, I don't have an idea. You have this courage to say that you don't know. You were telling me this morning that one of the things which you like very much about here, our President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, God bless him, when you ask him a question, if he doesn't have an answer, he tells, actually, I don't know the answer of this question.
I've never heard a leader of anything, whether it's a country or a company or a soccer team, ever in my life, in a life spent interviewing people. I've never heard a single one of them say, I don't know the answer. It's very complicated. I haven't figured it out. I've never heard anybody say that. And to me, that is the pure sign of wisdom, because wisdom grows from humility. Wisdom grows from the recognition that you are not God. And in the United States, we had a period where we were sort of, having this debate about, are some religions good and some religions bad? I'll tell you my view on it, and it's a hardened view. It's a sincere view. I divide the world not between Muslim, Jew, and Christian or Buddhist. I divide the world between people who believe they're God and people who know they're not. And the only people I trust are in the second category, because that is the beginning of wisdom. When you know you are not God, that you cannot affect every change that you want, you can't foresee the future, that you're not omnipotent, then you are much more likely to make good decisions, wise, humane decisions. By contrast, when you believe you have the power to shape the world and other people, as we were hearing this morning through biohacking, when you think you can create a better human being through technology, you're very dangerous, because you don't understand your own limits. And
Exactly. And that's what I was seeing with the Singularity Institute by Kurzweil and his crowd that are transhumanists. These people that are developing artificial intelligence and robotics and generative AI, they are crazy. They are literally, they'll make a lot of money, but they are crazy. And crazy people need to be dealt with. There is an orchestrated effort to destroy humanism and promote this transhumanistic agenda. And the only way out of it is war. You're not going to be able to be a pacifist through this. You're either going to fight for humanity and destroy these technologies, or you're going to succumb to them.
When you have those false beliefs, in my opinion.
By this note, Mr. Carlson, thank you very much for giving us this chance to come for the first time after your great interview to talk to the world through this podium and this country and my humble self. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so that was pretty good. Now, Tucker also did another video about something that is highly controversial that I can't talk about because it's about what happened in 2020, and I'll have a strike if I do that. But what I want to do is I want to play 2 hours ago. We're diverging, right? But I want to play something from Fox by General Keane.
If you want the performance of stainless steel, the versatility of cast iron, and the convenience of non-stick, then you want X-Lad.
There's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels firing 2 missiles at a cargo ship in the Red Sea en route to Iran, causing minor damage but no injuries there. This is believed to be the first time the Houthis have targeted an Iran-bound ship since launching its attack on international shipping. Reuters is reporting the ship targeted was managed by U.S. NASDAQ-listed Star Bulk carriers. Joining me right now is Fox News senior strategic analyst. He is chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane. General, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
Yeah, good morning, Maria.
What is your reaction to this hit from the Houthis?
Well, I think
But before we ask General Keane for his reaction on the Houthis, General, I know you do a lot of studying, but why did you not win a war in your whole career, General? Why?
I'll be firing on ships that are bringing corn out of Brazil into Iran. So they'll probably claim that
It's not a mistake because they don't want to admit that they make mistakes. But look, at the Houthi activity is continuing. We haven't been able to stop it. We really need a sustained campaign to take away their capabilities, the rockets, the missiles, their command and control, their guidance systems. Take that in a regularly sustained campaign is really the issue here, as opposed to something that's more episodic. They have a finite number of rockets and missiles and systems. Also, the second thing that's very important is that we have to make certain we're very aggressive about the transshipment from Iran in terms of rockets and missiles and their supplies, in terms of military components, to be able to continue this function. The Houthis have literally shut down more than 50% of the traffic going through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. I mean, that is a major victory on their part. And we've got to get after this.
Yeah, it sure is. And that's why I'm worried that this is going to trigger inflation again, General, because the fact that these ships have to go around the Horn of Africa and make this journey so much longer is obviously costing more money in terms of fuel. And that may very well be passed on to the consumer. So I'm looking at this as an economic story as well.
No, there's no doubt about it.
Ever since the Houthi firing on ships and this problem with transportation through that region, I've noticed a pressure to move oil up in the futures market. And that will trickle into, other products because the cost of making things will go up. So inflation, it may be inflationary.
I'll leave it to the economic experts what the impact is going to be for sure.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, that is what they're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of Iran's major objectives, they want to be the regional hegemon. They want to control the flow, particularly of oil out of the Persian Gulf. But they want to control the shipping as well. They want to have influence over that. That's what their domination is all about. And that's why the Houthis are playing Iran's hand. Not just the Houthis' own interests here. Mm-hmm. It's Iran that is driving it.
General, we do have breaking news right now. We want to show you these live pictures of the Senate because the Senate is passing the $95 billion aid package. It's going to mean money is going to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. They've been at this all night, General, and the voting started at 5:15. It looks like the money will pass in the Senate. But we don't have any border security, which is, of course, what the Republicans have been pursuing. Your reaction to this aid package passing the Senate?
Well, we got two major problems. Obviously, we have an open border that's been open now for years, and we've got to solve it at some point. And we also are trying to pass aid packages to Taiwan, Israel, and Ukraine. I'm certainly in favor of both of those things happening. This bill is only doing one of those. Mm-hmm. Look, we've got to get the funding to Ukraine. I mean, if Ukraine doesn't get the money, they're going to lose.
Yeah.
We're going to make up our mind what kind of world we really want to live in. Do we want to really have the Iranians driving what's happening in the Middle East? Do we want to have Russia expanding beyond Ukraine? And we have to put considerably more forces into Europe as a result of that and spend a heck of a lot more money.
You had over 20 years and over 5 trillion fucking American tax-paying dollars to get your fucking act in order. You failed.
What we would be spending on helping Ukraine, is this really what we want? Where China, Russia, and Iran are calling the shots and we're on our heels? That's what we're heading towards if we walk away.
Weaken our empire if we keep on funding this.
I also think the worry over the impact and the implications of all these illegal migrants coming into the country is equally concerning. You've got massive impact on cities across the country. Meanwhile, Israel has released this new video showing the rescue of 2 hostages from Gaza. They released a video yesterday, as you know. Israeli forces storming a heavily guarded apartment in Rafah overnight to free 2 Argentinian citizens from Hamas's captivity. This stunning video, meanwhile, from Iran shows thousands of people marking the Islamic Revolution's 45th anniversary on Sunday. Large crowds reportedly chanting, "Death to Israel, death to America," some burning both countries' flags. General, your thoughts? General King, this is not getting any better. And Iran apparently sees itself as winning here.
Well, first of all, our hats off to the Israelis in that daring rescue and getting 2 hostages back. Certainly had excellent intel and were able to pull that off. That's remarkable. Second thing, look at the good news is that most of the Iranian people reject the mullahs and their regime for the last 45 years. They have nothing to show for the mullahs' leadership. Their life has not improved whatsoever. They reject the fact that the mullahs get them involved in these so-called proxy wars all over the Middle East. The fact of the matter is the mullahs are hollow, and that's why we've got to put pressure on them and continue to have that pressure on them and reset our strategy with them.
So I found a study saying that dust mites are the #1 cause of allergies. Okay, I bought an
And reset our strategy with Iran. It is not right. It is insufficient in dealing with them. The appeasement diplomatic strategy has failed miserably, and we've got to look at this thing holistically now in terms of sanctions, stuff like the Trump administration, isolate them into that.
General, listen to Dr. Paul Cottrell. All right? The American taxpayer has given the military-industrial complex enough money to get the job done. Take what's already been purchased and fucking get the job done. Don't ask for any more money. Light the fire of the turban of the Ayatollah. Make sure that their military cannot go nuclear and get the job done. And don't ask for a penny more. You already have everything you need. Get the job done. General. And by the way, General, that's a nice tie.
And respond to this very aggressive proxy war that they're conducting by our own military aggression.
Yeah, I don't know why we're not ramping it up right now. Maybe there's something we don't know, but the Pentagon is saying that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is expected to resume his normal duties today, General. He was readmitted to the hospital. He checked into critical care at Walter Reed National Medical Center on Sunday, as you know, for an emergency bladder issue. Here's what the Pentagon had to say about Austin's latest hospital stay yesterday. Watch.
He's in good condition, according to his doctors. He will remain in the ICU ward for the duration of his stay in order to provide appropriate privacy, and will continue to receive critical care support in order to closely monitor his progress. His current bladder issue is not expected to change his anticipated full recovery from cancer, and his prognosis for cancer remains excellent. The White House was informed that he was being taken to the hospital, so that happened before he actually departed to go to the hospital. Congressional notifications were made as well.
General, of course, we're praying for Lloyd Austin.
The notifications this go around with this ICU trip, I think he learned his lesson. The issue I have is that he should have never been given a second chance, and he should have been forced to resign. With that first issue that we had at the beginning of the year with him. Because the Pentagon doesn't think that you should know things, even though they keep on asking for more of your tax-paying dollars. Right, General?
We wish him a very, very safe and speedy return, but he also was forced to scrap a trip to Brussels to take part in a Ukraine defense contract group gathering tomorrow, General. Your thoughts on the implications of this?
Well, they can handle that. I mean, his deputy will likely go, and Austin was the one that really started that whole initiative in bringing all the defense ministers together.
Well, just broadly speaking, that he's unwell.
Yeah, well, they're also telling us, I think, it depends how you look at that report. I thought that was a fairly positive report in the sense that he's progressing with his cancer issue, and this is not going to set him back, and he's going to be out of the hospital and resuming full duties here within a day or so. So
he should be forced to resign because he did not inform the public in his first hospitalization.
This is not going to be anything that's going to last any length of time, certainly, which would bring in the question whether he should continue his duties or not. This seems to be temporary, and unfortunately for him, he's going to be back on his feet here pretty quick.
All right, Godspeed. General, good to see you. Thank you, sir.
All right, great.
Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to listen to the Hill about Rand Paul and
These
Ukraine
are
funding.
the 9-inch Guggenheim professional tailor shears. But I'd like to show you how good they are.
Now, as we switch to the video, I'm going to do a product plug because this is PNN. Please go to my store and get the very high quality supplements that I offer and follow my anti-aging protocol. The first pillar of that anti-aging protocol is structural nanosilver liquids and gels. This product that I have in my hand is Max 14. It's 14 ppm, parts per million. So you take a teaspoon of this a day. If you're not feeling well, you take a tablespoon or more a day. I also have Max 35, which is a 35 ppm, and Silver Solution, which is a 30 ppm, all at different price points. But take a teaspoon of it a day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. Do it every day, and that will help to neutralize pathogens. That's the first pillar of the anti-aging protocol. The second pillar of the anti-aging protocol is a very strong antioxidant, C60. I sell it in avocado oil and in coconut oil. C60 is a carbon molecule that's 60 carbons connected, and it will help to soak up free radicals. By soaking up the free radicals, what will happen is that your cellular health will improve because cellular damage is caused by free radicals. A big part of cellular damage is caused by free radicals. Aging is caused by free radicals. So by soaking up the free radicals, you're going to age slower. Your cells are going to improve, and your mitochondria will be able to produce more ATP. Go to the store and get either the 2 ounce, the 4 ounce, or the 8 ounce configuration. It's C60. It's either an avocado or coconut oil, and it's part of the second pillar of the anti-aging protocol. The third part of the anti-aging protocol is bringing down inflammation. And you do that by taking turmeric every day. Turmeric's also an antioxidant, so it's dual purpose. And that will bring down inflammation. To control blood glucose levels, take ashwagandha root. And what that will do, it will bring down that inflammatory response because of sugar in the blood. You take them together, and that will bring down the inflammation and be part of the anti-aging protocol. By doing this regularly, you're going to have less stress on your body, and your immune system will start to improve. When you have a better immune system, you're actually being able to fight pathogens better. When you have a better immune system, you'll be able to fight cancers. Take my advice, especially in this post-era, this aftershock of what we just went through. If you don't take my advice, that's your own business. But if you do listen to me, you're going to improve your health, you're going to improve your immune system, and you're going to slow down that aging process. Now, back to the video that's dealing with Rand Paul flames Senate Dems after they rammed through $60 billion for Ukraine.
The Senate voted yesterday to advance more than $95 billion in funding to Ukraine. On Sunday, the Republican opposition to the bill was fierce. Senator Rand Paul had some choice words for his colleagues. Take a look.
Open the champagne, pop the cork. The Senate Democrat leader and the Republican leader are on the way to Kiev. They've got $60 billion they're bringing. I don't know if it'll be cash and pallets, but they're taking your money to Kiev. Now, they didn't have much time, really no time and no money to do anything about our border. We're being invaded. A liberal invasion's coming across our border. 800,000 people came illegally in the last month. And all they had time to do in the Senate was get the money, get the cash pallets, load the planes, get the champagne ready, and fly to Kiev.
Senator J.D. Vance had a different objection to the legislation, arguing that the bill contains a
Our representatives in Congress are slowly destroying our country. Thank you, ultra-liberal. Thank you, Democrat, for destroying our country. If you have a neighbor, if you even have a family member that's a Democrat, you tell them personally, thank you for destroying the country because your policies are an absolute failure.
And that would inevitably be used to impeach Donald Trump should he become president again and then decide to cut funding to Ukraine during his potential second term. Now, Vance sent a memo to his Senate colleagues yesterday urging them to vote no on the bill, writing that if President Trump were to withdraw funding or pause financial support for the war in Ukraine in order to bring the conflict to a peaceful conclusion, quote, over the objections of career experts, it would amount to the same fake violation of budget law from the first impeachment under markedly similar facts and circumstances. That's all according to J.D. Vance. Partisan Democrats, he says, would seize on the opportunity to impeach Trump once again, end quote. Now, former GOP hopeful.
Think about that. Step back and think about what Congress just did or is trying to do. Reduce the power of the White House to make decisions and to be nimble in changing dynamics in the world. And that if you go against this policy, then you must be a traitor. The globalists want the war. And if you put in a president that is anti-globalist, we're going to impeach you because the electorate must not know what they're doing. The voter must not know anything. The voter must not know what really needs to happen in this world because the puppet masters know all. Thank you, Democrat, for fucking the country up.
Vivek Ramaswamy chimed in, adding that here's the game, and many Republicans are falling for the trap. In 2019, they impeached Trump from withholding Ukraine funding over the objection of career experts. The current Ukraine bill sends money to the exact same
career experts. Some people call it the deep state. Some people call it the military-industrial complex. Dr. Paul Cottrell says it's the national security state, and that state needs to be destroyed.
And the same, quote, career experts will support spending it if Trump tries to pause that funding to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war. They'll use this toxic funding bill as leverage to impeach him. Again, shame on every Republican who votes for this bill. They'll be responsible for the outcome when it happens.
But Zelensky should maybe wait a minute before celebrating, as the bill appears to be DOA in the House. Speaker Mike Johnson has already said he will not take up the bill in the House of Representatives until border security is addressed. In a statement released yesterday.
What's her name? Brianna, I know that you're an ultra-liberal, but why don't you stop reading a teleprompter and actually say that this policy is antithetical to the separations of the different branches of government? Oh, by the way, you went to Harvard twice and have a law degree. Bitch.
Johnson wrote, quote, House Republicans were crystal clear from the very beginning of discussions that any so-called national security supplemental legislation must recognize that national security begins at our own border. That is what the American people demand and deserve. Now, in the absence of having received any single border policy change from the Senate, the House will have to continue to work its own will on these important matters. Now, of course, that is very rich within the Republican opposition to this very conservative.
Teleprompt Brianna. Let's see the wisdom of a Harvard law degree.
Restrictive border security bill that was put forward by Democrats precisely because they were so desperate to pass all of this foreign aid. But here we are.
It's like a win-win-win. a win. We didn't pass that border bill, which I was not super enthusiastic about for a variety of reasons. B, we didn't, we're not, they're opposing all this funding for foreign wars that I absolutely oppose. And C, they made the Democrats look like fools. So it's great. It's racking up W's.
What's odd is that there's something that progressives often say when justifying why they are not as successful as insurgents on the right. And Democrats, progressives, liberals will say things like, well, we want to get things done. They just want to be obstructive. So it's easier for them just to stand in the way of something and kill Bill. Fine. But because of the limited offerings coming from the Democrat that are actually substantively going to make people's lives better. Joe Biden threw away $15 minimum wage, student debt, all of these promises out the window because there's nothing to gain. And because everything that both parties are trying to put forward are so terrible. Funding for endless wars, this draconian border bill. I'm feeling very libertarian right now.
Oh, great.
Feeling very much
It's about time, honey. You know why? Because she aligned herself in prior years to Bernie Sanders.
Until we have some change, some substantial change.
I sense us getting along much better.
It's about time.
We were both in terrible moods.
Maybe it's because she has a red sweater on now.
This is still not good for the American public. I mean, Joe Biden is out here crowing about inflation numbers being down, and that is true. But in these core areas, the core areas that frankly drive inflation, generally speaking, of housing, food costs, insurance, and health insurance and education, prices are still sky high. So yes, it is true that if you looked at one of those, remember when Biden was putting out those four.
Rena, sit down and listen. Unless you have deflation, prices are going to stay sky high. And it's going to take a long time, if ever, where people's purchasing parity is going to be the same as pre-inflationary Yellen and Biden era. And then you add in the decoupling of AI into the job market and that decoupling of labor and capital that I've been talking about. And you're going to have instability, structural unemployment. The unemployment numbers are relatively low right now. Why? Because they're playing around with the data. So you see the headline number as being low, 3.7, 3.8, 3.6. But there's a structural and emergent behavior that is happening because of AI. And when that decoupling happens, Miss have a law degree, you're never going to have parity, purchasing parity in the pre-Biden era, from the pre-Biden era. So the only way we're going to have this to fix is that it has to go in a deflationary situation. Which is scary, especially if you own property. But that's the only way it's going to work.
July ads that said, your corn on the cob is 5 cents cheaper than it was 2 years ago. Yeah, I think that is true, but it's not really translating to people's lives in a meaningful way. We're existing as members of a generation that's the first to be worse off than their parents. I mean, we all know the whole long litany of depressing stats that are facing the American public.
I just
yeah, Brita, and I wonder why. Because the policies of the Democratic Party that you support, Bernie Sanders, led us down this road.
Romney has called the $96 billion foreign aid package the most important vote we will ever take as U.S. senators. That's the most important vote, is to continue funding a doomed military effort and that's not my subjective opinion that it's doomed. That is the opinion of our own military intelligence advisors. That is the opinion of Zelensky's top general, Zelensky. And the result of them losing this war is not going to be the entire collapse of Ukraine. It's going to be some territorial cessations. And that's what's going to happen anyway. So why are we throwing more money and more bodies at this conflict? It seems very, look, I respect Senator Mitt Romney for a lot of different things, but this seems ideologically.
Mitt Romney became senator to try to deep six Trump. He's a deep state player.
Back to me.
And to be clear, it's what's going to happen, because it has been clear from day one that Russia's a nuclear power. America does not want to engage, and there are limits to how much we're actually going to be able to support Ukraine, and Ukraine is never going to beat Russia. So those are the pieces that have been on the board since day one, which is why America has an enormous amount of blood and responsibility on its hands for having 40 negotiations in a month or so immediately after the conflict emerged. It's worth noting that there were two Democrats/independents that did not vote for this funding bill in the Senate. Bernie Sanders and Jeff Merkley were the only Democrats, and obviously Bernie's an independent, to not vote for this funding, which again would also ban funding for UNRWA as Gazans face a incredible humanitarian crisis.
Right. Well, we will continue to follow that, see if any legislation makes it out of this Congress.
Just remember, she's a Bernie supporter, and he is a borderline communist.
But glad to have you on my side in just opposing it.
I mean, the political implications of that, though, I think are really quite dire. I mentioned this point before, and the more time goes by, the more I come to believe it's a really good one. But the absence of a primary has not only had the effect of ensuring that Joe Biden is the nominee, in all likelihood, unless there's some pretty big change-ups happening here at the end, but that there is no affirmative vision for the Democratic Party. I saw people start to tweet things like, when are we getting Biden's platform? 4 years ago, people made fun of Donald Trump for not actually having a platform. He had like a paragraph that he posted to his website at the same time that Elizabeth Warren was throwing out wealth taxes and Green New Deals, and Bernie was doing the same, and Kamala Harris had her weird roundabout version of healthcare, and everyone was competing for a marketplace of ideas in this packed Democratic primary. And it was something that Democrats looked down at their nose at Republicans for not having an affirmative vision for the country. I think they were right to make that critique. And now look.
That's a very good point. I was seeing some speculation that just their thinking was that they have this mindset that Hillary Clinton was damaged in 2016 from having participated in an actually competitive primary with Bernie Sanders, which isn't true at all. She was damaged by her own general election campaign, which ignored what turned out to be what were predicted to be, and then turned out to be the pivotal states, which she didn't bother to campaign in. So bad. Well, we'll see where the.
All right, now what we're going to do is
We believe in going the extra mile to make sure that our boots will last for years to come. Every pair of Thursday boots are handcrafted by skilled artisans in a time-consuming.
Okay, so what we're going to do is another Hill video. And this is dealing with Biden feeds media with events about Bibi, doling out cash for Israel's genocide. All right, so we're going to get some real biased reporting here. But before we do that, because I know my coverage may disrupt your calcium absorption, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get your vitamin D3. It'll help with calcium absorption, but better yet, it helps with gene expression so your cells work properly. And if they get infected, they can go through apoptosis. So please go get my multivitamin from my store, the D3, at thestudio-reykjavik.com. And there's a lot of people out there that have brain fog, especially if they vote Democrat. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get my Clarity Factor. It stops brain fog. But not only that, you take this every day, and you're going to start to have that better dendritic connection because you're having your neurotransmitters firing. You're going to be able to concentrate better. I take this twice a day. I take it in the morning and the mid-afternoon. Some people just take it once a day, but take it every day, and you're going to be able to maintain mental acuity. Go to my store and get the Clarity Factor. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description.
A rare win for the mainstream media, as it for once accurately covered the war in Gaza and how the Biden administration seems content on letting Israel have whatever it wants. NBC News reported that while President Biden may disparage Israeli President Bibi Netanyahu in private, forward-facing policy in the region hasn't changed a whit. Reports of private frustration between Biden and Bibi have become more frequent as the war rages on. That same NBC News story said that Biden finds Netanyahu impossible to deal with, has described him as the primary obstacle to peace in the region, and has called him an a-hole. Though the White House has publicly assured the two world leaders are on good terms.
The rumors of
it is not a mystery on how I feel about this. All right. Netanyahu's political career is over. He will go down in history as either being a major failure during this crisis or a hero. He may be the prime minister of Israel that knocks out Iran's capability. I hope he does. Because the people that are on the sidelines wanting his job are much less aggressive in terms of stopping Iran from reaching a nuclear weapon. And because Biden's administration wants to kick the can down the road some more, and the ineffectiveness of our strikes on the Houthis and on factions within Iraq and Syria region, especially with that Tower 22 incident, our ineffective reaction to that, we're kicking the can down the road, and it's going to be worse, and it'll go unconventional. BB must not give in to the Biden administration. It will save more lives in the long run and prevent an unconventional release of something from Iran. Now, is that radiological? Is it biological? Is it chemical? Is it something else? We don't know. But the Iranians are pretty smart. And American foreign policy is pretty stupid.
Frustrations with Bibi come as journalists ask what exactly the Biden administration is doing when it comes to leveraging its assistance to Israel, to which the administration replies, not much. Take a look.
Well, what levers have you used?
So we have used diplomatic levers. The secretary
that means the secretary and the president and you and Kirby and whoever else standing up and saying, wagging your finger and saying that that's not really leverage.
We have engaged with them on at a multitude of levels at this administration, and as you look at the list that we just went through with Humera, we have seen them take steps at our urging that have had real tangible impact, but they have not been enough.
But what levers have you actually?
I think that when the United States of America stands up and says something publicly, it matters.
If you say so. Whatever levers the U.S. government is using certainly is not legislative. The Senate voted 66 yeas to 33 nays to advance a bill banning UNRWA funding while making an exception for Israel funding. And
see, my observation when watching these talking heads and teleprompt readers, they make an erroneous comparison between what's going on in Ukraine and what's going on in Israel. It's this whole Westphalian logic concept. In Ukraine, these talking heads and many others want to stop Putin. All right. And, help Ukraine out. But some talking heads, especially if it's a balanced panel, will say, stop the funding in Ukraine. All right. And then they want to stop the funding or stop the help by the United States with the Israelis and slow down the war in the Middle East. But the thing is that Ukraine issue and the Israel issue are two different issues. And they can't use the same diplomatic strategy. One is biblical. One goes thousands and thousands of years and was written down that it was going to go down this way. So there was a warning thousands of years ago that there was going to be a fight between Jacob and Esau. All right. And then what's going on in Ukraine? I take the stance that we should stop the funding in Ukraine and reach homeostasis with Russia and try to normalize relations. Putin doesn't have much more time as president of Russia, even though they're going through an election process. He's getting up there in age, right? He doesn't have that much time left. He has more time than Biden, obviously. But when it comes to the Palestinians and the Israeli conflict, or the Israeli-Hamas war, this is a change in regional dynamics, where there's going to be an alignment between Jacob and Ishmael working together to get rid of Esau. Now, in modern terms, that means the Saudis, the Jordanians, are going to be working with the Israelis to get rid of the Palestinians.
Overfunding for Gaza. Speaker Mike Johnson threw cold water on that plan, releasing a statement yesterday urging the Senate to focus away from funding foreign engagements and instead focus on our own borders. Johnson wrote, quote, House Republicans were crystal clear from the very beginning of discussions that any so-called national security supplemental legislation must recognize that national security begins at our own border. It is what the American people demand and deserve. Now, in the absence of having received any single border policy change from the Senate, the House will have to continue to work its own will on these important.
Securing the border is majorly important for us. I totally agree with that. Money should flow to be able to secure that border. And, oh, by the way, the people in charge should be following the law. Like the Secretary of DHS, who should be impeached because he's not following the law. And we shouldn't have a president that's taking down a border. We should have presidents that put up borders. But there is a problem that is happening with the ones that gravitate to that line of thinking. And that is they're monolithic. They want to fund the border, but they want to be isolationists. So they want to stop the Ukraine war and stop the war in Israel with the Palestinians. The war that's going on in Ukraine is not metaphysical. It's territorial. And oh, by the way, it's almost gangster because it happened because the CIA kept on poking the bear for 20 years. What's going on in Israel, that's metaphysical. And we're being judged because of the ultra-liberal society that we have. So you stop the war in the Middle East with Palestine and with the Palestinians with the Israelis, and you try to prevent Israel from knocking out Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran, then you're going to be judged. And don't be surprised that your empire starts to crumble from within. Because we already have the fracture signs, the loss of religion in American society, the loss of the family unit, and the loss of country, the loss of this idea of having a strong affinity to country, God, and family. Because the ultra-liberal group wants to destroy your country, wants to make everyone non-religious, if not flat-out atheist, usher in transhumanism, and they don't want, they want to destroy the family unit. They're promoting this whole gay pride agenda and the re-gender assignment that's going on in young children and confusing them. And it'll get even worse with VR and AR. It's a battle of metaphysics. What's happening in Ukraine is not a battle of metaphysics. It's a territorial dispute. They're much different. Don't think that they're the same. They're not. If you think they're the same, you're an idiot.
Matters. Yeah. So look, on one level, Johnson is full of malarkey. He just shut down the border deal of his dreams, and now they're just doing all this posturing because they've all but said very explicitly it doesn't help Trump in this election.
Right, they're using the border as an excuse to prevent funding for foreign wars. Would you agree with that policy? I'm happy.
On the perfectly happy. What I was going to say on the flip side of that is that.
Listen, Robbie, some wars need to be fought. Being an isolationist during World War II probably would have led to all of Europe being run by the Nazis. Bobby. Some wars are meant to be fought. Oh, by the way, during the Revolution, there were a lot of people that were sitting on the sidelines because they were afraid that the Patriots would lose, and that if they were siding with Washington, that the king would hunt them down. So they played the sideline. They didn't want to get involved. They want to be a pacifist. Some wars are definitely worth fighting for. Many wars in the contemporary context are not worth fighting for. But it's too simple to say stop funding wars in general. That's too simple of a concept. You need to look at a little bit more of the nuance, Robbie. And, oh, by the way, the decline of the Roman Empire because of ultra-liberal policy. We're being judged. Everyone's getting cursed, as I've been saying. And the ones that pick the right policy, God, country, and family, are going to be blessed. Ones that want to be pacifists, ones that think that they're one-man island, that you're not going to fare too well.
God bless that that there's a backstop that's happening in the Senate here. For their own Machiavellian political reasons, that's preventing an enormous amount of aid going out the door to a country that we have to remember the ICJ just decided was plausibly committing a genocide. A country that just implemented what has been called the Super Bowl massacre the night before last, where there was the last huge civilian population in Gaza, 1.5 million people who were raided and attacked their 10th city after having been told this is a safe place to go, this is a safe place to reside. So, I'm glad it exists. And contrast that, by the way, to what happened when Democrats were in the House and we got instance after instance, video after video of people like AOC getting browbeat, pressured, and crying on the House floor because their arms were twisted into voting for more funding for Israel, voting for more Iron Dome funding. And who knows what those kind of bargains were like or what kind of pressure they were under. But at the end of the day, the Democrats get everybody in line to continue to vote to send money overseas. And through whatever machinations happened over the course of the last year with a McCarthy ouster and what have you, we now have Republican leadership in the House, which is putting a stopgap on this stuff.
Yeah. So in terms of the statements made by Biden officials with respect to Netanyahu, look, I've said this before, but I just think Biden.
If you really think that not fighting Esau is going to make the world a better place, then obviously you haven't been paying attention to modern history and biblical history. But she's pushing for reparations because America should be apologetic for everything.
Making himself look so weak,
yes,
is landing in this uncanny valley of just the worst of all worlds. We could just say, we agree with what Israel's doing, or we don't like it, but we think it's necessary and we support it and we're funding it because we think this is tied to our own national security interests. They could make that claim. I wouldn't agree with that, but they could make that claim. Or they could say, well, we would have liked to support Israel, but what they're doing has gone far beyond the pale, and Netanyahu is difficult to work with, and he's taking us for a ride, and we're not going to fund it. Sorry. Or we could have my position, which is, what they're doing is really their business, and the U.S. shouldn't be involved in every conflict all over the globe, and we're not going to fund it because it's not in our own national security interest. Good luck to you. But what they're doing is saying, we don't really agree with what they're doing, but we're powerless to stop it. Here's more money.
Yeah,
who does that please?
Yeah, what's especially perverse about this is that 27,000 plus people have already been killed, right? So remember, we got to this place through, after we got to this place, we had multiple instances of spokespeople standing at a podium just like that telling us, well, that Israel has a right to self-defense. Israel has just experienced the biggest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. Israel is our ally. Israel has a right to self-defense. And it was clear as day to any reasonable observer who understands the history of the region and the pattern of Israel's excessive retaliation to attacks that we were.
Really? Really, Brina? What about the warning for 3,000 years that Esau is a fucking animal? You think that the world is going to be a safer place aligning with Esau? You really think so? Really think so? Huh? Don't think so.
Very quickly get to a place where nothing that Israel was doing could be characterized as self-defense. Knowing that was going to come, the Biden administration should have put some guardrails on and said, look, I would have recommended none of this be allowed, right? But even if you're in a position that the Biden administration where you're going to say, I'm going to let them get their.
It's not about national defense anymore in that region. It's about setting in motion a new era. And that's an era that's not Esau. That's an era of Ishmael and Jacob and its alignment. But she's so focused on the contemporary history. Oh, the contemporary history of the Palestinian state is a modern construct. Just like how Ukraine is a modern construct. And let's think about that. Ukraine as a modern construct was kind of like this trying to create a buffer and a stabilization country within that region in the European theater. And the Palestinian construct was something similar. Didn't end up that way, but it was a British way of trying to have a foot in the region. It was a little bit about oil. It was a lot about oil. Modern construct. Those are the two similarities, using Westphalian logic based on modern constructs of those states that didn't really have historically any affiliation with the land. Those are facts. But another fact is the warning that the world will be judged when Esau and Jacob are fighting each other. Now, which side do you really want to be on? You want to be a side with a bunch of animals, or a side that is going to be taking down that Dome of the Rock? Because the bottom line is this. During the Crusades, the Christians failed to get the job done.
An eye for an eye, pound of flesh, or whatever biblical metaphor you want to use, to say, we're going to cut this off at, you get 3 weeks, you get a month, you get 5,000 deaths, you get 10,000 deaths. You got to keep your civilian to Hamas kill ratios within the.
Wrong argument, honey. It's resetting to a biblical era, to reboot the machinery. It happens to be where the Dome of the Rock is.
Rounds of typical warfare, but once you eclipse that, you're off the teat. You know, you're off the funding teat. That didn't happen, and now we're so far over the line that all of the excuses that were once used to justify getting to this point expired months ago. When you have 12,000 children,
she is annoying. Why do we assume that the prosperity in the United States is through our own volition? Why do we assume that? Perhaps the United States was given a blessing because of certain, worth ethic and affiliation to family and God. And we're being tested. And if we pick the wrong path, perhaps that prosperity goes away. Because I have a feeling that when a society isn't gravitating to God, country, and family, they're not as productive. They're not as stable. They don't have a blessing. Be wise. Pick the right path. Because you really think Esau is going to be on your side when they build the caliphate? I think that through modern history, that would not bode well for Western society. Look at the invasion that's happening in Europe and how it's destabilizing Germany, France, and the UK. You still think Esau is going to be on your side, ultra-liberal?
When you have graphic videos of a 12-year-old girl dangling from a wall with her legs being stripped off from the night when Americans were all watching the Super Bowl, when you have every single university in Gaza destroyed, when you have 16 cemeteries desecrated, you've gone way over the line, and there's literally nothing you can say. So that's why you look weak, because at this point, there's nothing you can say, and the public start to ask the question, well, why wouldn't you have stopped this earlier? And why is the most you can do is to put out these statements to the press to try to make it look as though there's this moral
because it's not Westphalian, honey. It's biblical. It's metaphysical. It's Kabbalistic. It's at a higher intelligence level than a Harvard grad from the law school.
Between you and BB, I'm telling him behind the scenes, I'd really prefer that he not, without using any of the levers at your actual disposal to prevent him from dropping the bombs, which literally have the English names of American manufacturers on the bottom of them.
And this is someone we're ostensibly close with, that we've been described as the key U.S. ally in the Middle East. And if we can't get him to do what the Biden administration claims it says it wants him to do, which is in some sort of way rein this in. You won't do that. So how can Biden be trusted? Right, we support a two-state solution and they don't. How is Biden ever going to get someone like Vladimir Putin to play ball, or Xi Jinping, if we can't even get ostensibly our best friend is how they're described by the administration, and they don't and Biden is not respected enough, or the U.S. government at large, the taxpayers are not respected enough by a key ally. I think that's very frustrating and makes the administration look weak, regardless of what your feelings are on the conflict itself.
And kudos to the journalists that have been asking these questions. There was another exchange just yesterday with John Kirby where he was asked, Has Biden threatened to strip aid to Israel? Really concretely, good question. Has Biden threatened to strip aid to Israel if they advance a Rafah operation that doesn't account for civilians? Caveat if they want to. They can do it, but they got to account for civilians. Reasonable question. John Kirby, we are going to continue to support Israel. They have a right to defend themselves against Hamas, and we're going to make sure they have the tools to do that.
Yeah. But I mean, that's a clear statement.
It's the wrong statement, Kirby. It's not about defense. It's about ushering in a new era. Let Jacob and Esau battle it out. I'm pretty sure that the world will be more at peace afterwards.
That statement, obviously, but that, if they consistently take the position that we support Israel, we are on Israel's side, and Israel can continue doing whatever is necessary to defeat Hamas, and Hamas is not defeated, so this will continue until Hamas is defeated, that at least makes some internal sense. But then when they undermine their own position by saying, but Netanyahu is privately an a-hole, and we actually don't want him to continue until Hamas is defeated, we want him to stop at some time short of that because the too many casualties are making people in our own Democratic coalition upset with us, and it's imperiling my reelection, and like that's the part where I'm like, okay, well then you just look kind of incompetent.
Right. Well, it's not.
Well, Biden is incompetent. Biden is incompetent, Bobby. Get it straight. All right? Now, if you're using the argument that Israel's killing too many people in Gaza, what about the argument kicking the can down the road where unconventional warfare from Iran leads to millions and millions of deaths through a nuclear detonation? Who's then at fault, Bobby? The whole idea is to solve this problem before Iran has a nuclear capability. So it's not just about Palestine. It's about knocking out Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran. So are we going to be philosophically consistent, Bobby? Do you want to kick the can down the road where there's more death and destruction? And oh, by the way, it'll cost more American taxpayer dollars? Well, when you look at the net present value of a decision here, Bobby, it's better to not get them out now. Dumbass.
Here, the issue is that half of U.S. adults think that Israel has gone too far, and big majorities believe that there should be a ceasefire. That's Biden's concern, not what little.
Half of the country is Democrat. Half are Republican. Half are stupid. Half have at least some moral compass. I just can't take it anymore. I just can't take it anymore. Please, if you are entertained in what I have to say and get informed, please make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 YouTube channels. I am censored, so please subscribe to all 3 of those channels and watch those premieres. Also subscribe to Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Those are my safe harbors. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products, the very high quality supplements that I offer at the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description. Please donate. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, and Buy Me a Coffee. Those links are on my website at the very bottom of the homepage. Links are also in the description of this video. Please subscribe to my Patreon account so you would be able to help support my work. But if you purchase the higher tier membership, you will have access to my classes on pulmonology. Go to my store, sign up for the classes if you would like to get full access to the PDFs and to the lectures. For each of the PDFs, I have 22 lectures for the pulmonology module that gets released each day, each business day. There's 22. There's about 8 or 9 lectures already uploaded. You can purchase it for $50 and you'll have access to those 22 lectures and the 22 PDFs. If you buy a higher tiered level Patreon subscription, you'll have different access to the videos. Tier 2 will get access to the first and the last video for that module. Tier 3 will get the first half of the access to the videos, and Tier 4 will get the full access to the videos. You won't have access to the PDF though. If you purchase for $50, you get full access to the module, and you can download the PDF slide decks. You will learn a lot about pulmonology. You'll learn a lot about the pulmonary system. And the whole idea is for you to become a citizen scientist and get informed. Thank you for supporting my work. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the ones that are listening on X. And thank you for the ones that are watching through the various channels. Have a nice day.